Who would think that the act of committing a first-degree felony, such as manslaughter, would lead to a profitable venture for an entrepreneur? This, unfortunately, is common practice in the United States. The owners of these for-profit institutions benefit off of government subsidies. These subsidies, of course, are being paid by taxpayers. I was first introduced to the topic of private prisons when I watched an episode of Adam Ruins Everything. I was not incentivized to research this topic until I had a friend of mine recently be convicted of a drug-related felony. This caused me to do some research into Montana prisons, and I found that Montana prisons had the highest amount of incarcerated inmates in private prisons. This worried me. As I did more research, I found that these privatized prisons are not the place where a prisoner wants to spend their time. We must ban all private prisons in the United States because they prioritize the bottom line over providing a service to the public. When money is the only thing on the minds of people who run the operation, many budget cuts are made. This includes paying the employees at a much lower rate and hiring much fewer, as my research shows. This causes prisoners to receive horrible treatment as they are not equipped to take on these prisoners. They also find ways to profit off of the prisoners by having them create goods that they can then sell. There's also much higher violence, as shown that there is a 50% higher violence occurrence in private prisons, as shown by my sources. The reason privately owned prisons even operate in the United States is due to one main underlying factor: money. The United States was experiencing a problem with overcrowding in their prisons. This was because more people were being in prison and that they were serving longer sentences. So these claims were made attractive to lawmakers because they claimed that they not only operated at a lower cost, but they could do it at a higher quality. So that is why they're doing that. But in order for them to do this, they would have to cut expenses. As shown in my source, it shows that they have much lower guard per prisoner ratio in these private prisons than these public prisons. It is not proven if they have in fact also reached the goal of lower expenses, because they are not required by law to release their budget or their revenue to the public. There are three factors lawmakers should consider when deciding whether or not they should There are three factors that lawmakers should take into consideration before continuing to support these for-profit prisons to remain operational. Those factors are from an ethical, logical, and pathos standpoint. Firstly, from the ethical standpoint, we should not let these continue, as there's much more violence and much more higher suicide rates in these prisons. From a logical standpoint, may I remind you that it is us, the people, that are indirectly funding these institutions. When we pay taxes to the government, it is with the expectation that these prisoners are given the tools to reform. This is not the case in private prisons, so we are not getting our money's worth. In the pathos standpoint, you should know that every prisoner has a family and people that care about them. If you had a person that was close to you go to prison, you would have in your hopes that they would be reformed into a proper citizen once again. These factors should also be considered by us, the people, because it applies to us, the people. There is so much more to be said and done about the prison system in America. However, the focus today is solely on privately owned for-profit prisons. For the solution, we should take a look at the actions already taken by 22 states. These states have banned for-profit prisons to run on their establishments. We have to get that number to 50. In order to do that, we must vote in representatives that support this standpoint. Read the platforms of those running and make sure to voice your concerns of the matter. We have already seen positive outcomes come from the states that have already taken actions. Leave me alone. This is my last take, you jerk. And the people paying the prisoners are much more likely to reform, as there is much fewer crimes committed in prison. And the people paying taxes don't have to worry about money going into the pockets of scheming third parties. In conclusion, we should all support the action to ban for-profit prisons in the United States. When these prisons are not for profit, there is a much higher likelihood that they are willing to do what is right instead of what is financially beneficial. These individuals held in prison are not receiving the proper care, which cuts their opportunities to reform down by quite a bit. This also hurts members of their families as well as the taxpayers. It is imperative that we vote in representation that is for this action. As citizens of the United States, I now turn to you, as it is our moral and ethical obligation to put an end to this.